The movie begins in an underground world in New York City, where the legendary assassin John Wick is gearing up and cooking up plans for an epic quest of vengeance against the powerful High Table, a secret organization that controls the world's assassins and had marked him for death and exiled him. Then, a guy dressed as a bum walks into the covert location where John Wick was training, holding a suit, and he asks him if he is ready to go after the High Table. John simply says yeah. John's quest takes him to the Sahara Desert, where he relentlessly chases down the Elder's men on horseback, dispatching his adversaries' henchmen, and finally confronts the Elder, demanding answers about a mysterious ring. However, to his surprise, the Elder reveals that the ring is no longer in his possession. In a swift turn of events, John executes the Elder and moves forward on his path of vengeance. In response, the Marquis Vincent de Gramont, a member of the High Table, summons the New York Continental Hotel manager, Winston, and his loyal concierge, Sharon, who are allied with John Wick. The Marquis reveals that the High Table had granted him unlimited resources to eliminate John Wick, yet he had faulted several times in the past. He's not pleased with Winston's failure to assassinate Wick and delivers a harsh punishment by blowing up New York Continental, killing his loyal concierge, Sharon, and exiles him from the organization. The scene shifts to Paris, where we meet Kane, a retired blind assassin, spending time in the park with his daughter, Mia. However, their peaceful existence is shattered when the Marquis compels Kane the blind assassin to hunt down John Wick by threatening the life of his only daughter, Mia. Reluctantly, Kane accepts the orders, setting the stage for an intense showdown. We are then shown John Wick taking refuge at the Osaka Continental, a sanctuary for the dark world, run by his friend Shimazu Koji and his daughter, Akira, the concierge. Despite Akira's initial distrust, Koji agrees to offer John a secret hiding place. But their haven is soon infiltrated by Chitty, the Marquis' right-hand man, and his ruthless hit squad in an attempt to lure John out. Koji's own men show up and face off against the High Table assassins by firing arrows in the darkness. When the hitmen make it to the roof, John grabs his gun and starts to do what he does best. A fierce battle ensues, with Koji's guards and John fighting to protect themselves. In the midst of the chaos, Kane the blind assassin, tracking John's movements, joins the fray, making the encounter even more difficult for Koji's men. He sets up traps to help him hear where his targets are moving, and then uses his sword and gun to kill them. Akira joins the fight and executes some of Chitty's men, but she ends up getting shot and wounded. John helps her and Koji get out, while he continues to fight more men. Eventually, Kane finds John. The two of them used to be friends, so Kane is reluctant to go after John, but he does so for the sake of Mia. John and Kane briefly fight, but John manages to get away because Kane could not see him. In the middle of the gunfights, a bounty hunter, Mr. Nobody, and his German shepherd show up, and he kills some of the gunmen going after John. He wants the contract on John's head too, but he claims that the current hit $20 million is not enough, so he is currently helping John to switch the situation to his advantage. Meanwhile, as Koji and Akira are running out, they encounter Kane. He and Koji are also old friends, but Koji refuses to allow Kane to go after John, so they engage in a sword fight, and Kane delivers a fatal blow and kills him. Akira hugs her father's body as he passes away and tries to slay Kane with his sword, but he warns her not to do so should she meet the same fate as her father and promises to see her again. Akira seeks up John at the railway station and accuses him of being responsible for her father's passing. He is warned by her to murder Kane or else. In New York, Winston meets up with the Bowery King, the powerful head of the Soup Kitchen, an underworld intelligence network in New York City disguised as a homeless shelter. They both acknowledge that they are targets now that John Wick is on the run and has a bounty on his head, and anyone who helps him is also a target. So they plan a counterattack against the High Table. The Harbinger, serving as a messenger for the High Table, embarks on a journey to Japan to meet the Marquis, who is tasked with tracking down John Wick. The Harbinger conveys to the Marquis the High Table's dissatisfaction regarding the excessive bloodshed at the Osaka Continental. As a sanctuary for assassins, the Osaka Continental is a place where the High Table vehemently denounces any form of violence. The Marquis justifies the necessity of eliminating John Wick, not only to neutralize the threat he poses, but also to dismantle the notion of his invincibility and untouchable status. Mr. Nobody visits the Marquis and demands $23 million to kill John Wick. The Marquis refuses, saying that he will kill John Wick himself. Mr. Nobody then provokes the Marquis, telling him he will be long dead before that, making the Marquis impale his hand and gives him a test of choosing to either pull the knife out or pull his hand out, to see where his ambitions and loyalty lies. Mr. Nobody pulls his hand out, cutting between his fingers, and the Marquis agrees to honor his request. John meets Winston at his concierge, Sharon Grave tomb, offering his condolences for the loss of his friend. Winston reveals his plan to get back at the High Table to John and tells him the only way to win his freedom from the High Table is to challenge the Marquis to a duel. However, duels between members of the High Table are considered to be myths, but Winston believes that this is the only way to defeat the Marquis and restore order to the underworld. The only people who can help John in his duel are his family, the Rusker Roma. However, the Rusker Roma have severed ties with John after he broke the rules of the Continental by killing a member of the High Table on Continental grounds. John knows that he needs to win back their trust if he wants their help. John travels to seek out the Rusker Roma. He knows that this is a dangerous mission, but he is determined to win his freedom and restore order to the underworld. John travels to the Rusker Roma in Berlin, where he is greeted with a shotgun blast by the priest before he is tied up with a noose around his neck. He is met by his adoptive sister Kasia, who is angry with John because his killing of the elder led the Marquis to order the execution of her father Piotr, who would have approved of John in the duel. John seeks re-acceptance to their ranks, but the price of redemption involves a daunting task: the elimination and proof of death of Killa Harkin, a German High Table member responsible for the murder of Wick's adoptive sister's father. We are then shown John Wick going to Killa Harkin's nightclub in Berlin, accompanied by Kane and Mr. Nobody, who have tracked him down. John, Kane, and Mr. Nobody sit down for a game of poker with Killa in order to decide who would kill John and claim the bounty money. Killa cheats, and John calls him out on it. Killa insults John Wick and tells him he enjoyed killing his adopted father Piotr. This provokes John Wick to use a playing card as a makeshift weapon and slices Killa's neck, and a battle begins. Kane and Nobody hold their own against the thugs together with Nobody's loyal dog. John goes after Killa throughout the club in the midst of oblivious people who were partying hard. Killa Harkin's henchmen go after John, but they all meet predictably bloody ends, leaving Killa and John to finish the fight. Killa uses his heavy body to get the upper hand and pushes John over a balcony, but it is not enough to stop him. John eventually corners Killa and knocks him over a stairway, sending him falling until he smashes headfirst onto the ground, killing him. John then takes one of Killa's gold teeth as proof of his death and brings it to Kasia, who reacts approvingly and helps John undergo the ceremony, where he is branded with the family's crest and given support for the duel. Now, after John Wick gained his family's support, he tells Winston to visit the Marquis with the official challenge document for the duel. The Marquis tries to refuse, but Winston reminds him that he is still bound to the High Table and its customs. Winston also demands that if John wins, Winston will no longer be exiled, and his Continental will be uncondemned and rebuilt, as it were, with his management reinstated. However, the Marquis reminds Winston that he will be John's second, so if John dies, so will he. John arrives to sit down with the Marquis as the Harbinger presides over them to discuss the conditions of the duel. They will meet at the Sacré-Cœur Basilica in Paris at sunrise, and will duel with guns. If either of them fails to show up before the deadline, it will be an automatic forfeiture. The duel will be to the death, and if either man fails to show up, they will be executed. The Marquis gives Kane an offer to be his second in the duel, and in turn grant him and his daughter freedom from the High Table if he kills John, which Kane accepts. John goes to a church where he sits to pay tribute to his former and dead wife, Helen. Kane meets him there in a friendly manner, telling him about Mia and what he has to lose if he does not obey the Marquis orders. John later meets with Winston and Bowery King. The latter gives him a new gun and bulletproof suit for the duel to come. The Marquis, determined to prevent John from reaching the meeting point of the duel, then deploys Chitty and his thugs to hunt John down and announces a bounty of millions to any assassins that can kill John before sunrise. John makes his way to the meeting point, but he is pursued by scores of assassins. He faces off against gunmen in the streets. He shoots the bad guys or lets them get hit by cars. The High Table keeps track of his whereabouts, leading to more assassins going after him. John enters a warehouse full of bad guys and fires explosive rounds at them. At the same time, Mr. Nobody helps take out some of the assassins and contacts the Marquis, demanding a higher payment by leveraging the desperate situation that the Marquis was in. The Marquis ultimately agrees to a $40 million contract, and Mr. Nobody starts to pursue John Wick, and they get locked in a tight battle. Chitty shows up and tries to shoot Mr. Nobody's dog that was trying to protect his master, but John prevents him, causing a stunned Mr. Nobody to abandon his pursuit of the bounty. John finally makes it to the steps leading up to the Sacré-Cœur, the meeting point. He is exhausted, but he is determined to face the Marquis. However, he is ambushed by Chitty, who knocks him all the way back down the steps. Kane shows up to help John get to the top. He helps John kill Chitty's guys, who had lined up on the stairs that led up to the meeting point of the duel. Mr. Nobody also arrives and starts fighting Chitty because he mistreated and tried to kill his dog. With Mr. Nobody's help, Chitty is brought down. The dog bites him in the balls. Mr. Nobody puts a bullet in his head, and for good measure, the dog pees on Chitty's face. Just as the sun rises, John arrives. He and Kane take up their pistols and begin a traditional duel where they fire rounds at each other until one dies. They both succeed in striking each other twice, leaving bullet holes on their bodies. During the third round, Kane shoots John in the stomach, but John doesn't respond. The Marquis, thinking that John is on his last breath, orders that he claim the final blow that will kill John Wick. He grabs his gun and aims for John before Winston tells him he's an arrogant asshole and reminds him John didn't fire his last round. The Marquis realizes this too late before John blows his brains out. The Harbinger then declares that both John and Cain are free from their obligations to the High Table. John goes back down the steps and briefly thinks about his dead wife, Helen, saying her name before he slumps over and dies a free man. Winston and Bowery King bury John next to Helen, with his tombstone reading "loving husband" as he requested. Bowery King asks Winston if he thinks John is in heaven or hell, to which Winston replies, "Who knows?" The two walk away, with Bowery King continuing to look after John's dog. In the after credits, Cain goes to find Mia, his daughter, and reunites with her. Not far from him, Akira approaches him and exacts her revenge for killing her father.